You might be being deceived and not even realize it today. I'm going to reveal to you 5 false teachings that are destroying the faith of millions of Christians and leading people directly to eternal condemnation doctrines that may seem harmless but are driving you away from God, the truth of the Bible and yourself, salvation. Are you absolutely sure that you are following the true gospel? Is what you have learned about God and about Jesus Christ really the truth, or are you being manipulated without knowing it? There is a spirit of deception operating within the church as disguised as light, and if you don't open your eyes now, it might be too late. But don't worry, because today I will expose these eyes and show you the truth that can completely change your spiritual life. What you will learn here may be the key to your salvation and liberation. Don't leave this video because the last false teaching is the most dangerous of all, and it may be right inside your own. Church, get ready, because this revelation will transform your relationship with God. Let's discover the truth together before it's too late. Have you ever felt pressured to give TS out of fear that you were stealing from God? Have you heard that if you don't contribute, the gates of heaven will be closed to you? What if I told you that the church never told you the whole truth about the tithe? The reality is that many Christians live under a burden of guilt and fear, giving their money not out of love, but out of obligation. And worse, they believe that if they don't pay, God will punish them. But today you will discover 3 biblical secrets about the time that can completely transform your view of this practice. What you're about to hear may shock you, but it can also set your faith free once and for all if you want to know whether you're being manipulated or if you really have an obligation before God. Stay with me until the end because what I'm about to reveal can change your spiritual life forever. The Lord's Prayer is not just something we say, but something we live. The most important lesson we got from going through the Lord's Prayer is this prayer is not about changing God's mind, it's about changing us. Think about that. How often do we pray as if we are trying to convince God to do something, as if we need to persuade Him to care about our needs? But Jesus didn't give us a prayer of persuasion. He gave us a prayer of alignment. A prayer that when understanding, reshapes our priorities, refocuses our hearts, and re-enters our faith on God's power, not our problems. This is why Jesus didn't teach His disciples to pray for their kingdoms to grow, for their will to be done, for their success to come. He taught them to pray first for God's kingdom, first for His will, first for His presence. Because when we pray like this, we are no longer just asking God to change our circumstances. We are asking Him to change us. Did you know that Cain and Abel had twin sisters that were completely left out of the Bible? If you've looked up and down in the Bible and thought, wait a second, I don't see anything about Cain and Abel having sisters, you're absolutely correct. The Bible doesn't directly mention sisters by name, just like it never directly names Cain's wife or Seth's wife. But here's the thing we know. They had wives, and logically those wives had to come from somewhere. So who were these sisters born alongside Cain and Abel, who seem completely forgotten in the biblical text? Let's talk about the oldest sister, Lulua, the first forgotten daughter of Adam and Eve. Her story tucked away in the book of Adam and Eve is fascinating and deeply intertwined with the early struggles of humanity. Ready? Let's dive in. When Eve gave birth to her first children, she brought forth not only a son, Cain, but also a daughter, Lua. According to the text, Adam was overjoyed celebrating both Eva's safe delivery and the birth of their children. Now, here's something pretty interesting. Lula's name translates to beautiful. The text tells us she was so stunning that she was even described as being more beautiful than her mother. Can you imagine that she was likely the first symbol of beauty in the world? Because of Lu's beauty, she became pretty and entangled in a lot of family drama, as was customary in their time. Adam and Eve decided to arrange marriages for their children. The plan was for Cain to marry Abel's sister Aa and for Abel to marry Lulua. But here's where the cracks began to form. Cain wasn't happy about this decision. He was deeply jealous, feeling that his parents loved Abel more, and resented the idea of being paired with a CLE, who the text describes as ill-favored, while Abel was set to marry the stunning Lua. You can almost hear Cain's inner voice saying, "Why does Abel get everything?" Including the beautiful sister. This jealousy simmered, and eventually played a huge role in what happened next, now according to the book of Adam and Eve. Lulu's beauty became a source of conflict. Cain's envy towards Abel wasn't just about favor from their parents or sacrifices to God. It was also tied to Lulua. Cain wanted Lulua for himself, and his anger at being denied her led him to the ultimate act of betrayal, the murder of Abel. After Cain killed Abel, Lulua was understandably distraught. The text describes how she wept and ran to her parents to tell them what had happened. Imagine her grief, not only losing a brother, but knowing she was in some ways at the center of this tragic event. Despite everything after Abel's death, Cain took Lula as his wife. Cain took Lua and married her without Adam and Eve's permission. The text paints a vivid picture of the heavy sorrow Adam and Eve felt so much, so that they couldn't even stop Cain from marrying Lulua. It's as if their grief over Abel's death left them powerless to intervene. Cain and Lula then left the mountain where the family lived, moving to a lower land near the place where Cain had killed Abel. In that new land, they started their own family. Lulua bore children for Cain, and their descendants began to multiply. So that is what the book of Adam and Eve says about Lulu's story. Her story is both tragic and fascinating. She was a central figure in humanity's earliest days, caught between her brother's jealousy, her family's sorrow, and the need to continue the human race. What's striking is how her beauty became a catalyst for conflict. Yet, she also played a role in ensuring humanity's growth despite the chaos. When we think of Adam and Eve's children, it's easy to focus on Cain and Abel, or later Seth, who carried on the righteous lineage. But Lulua reminds us that there's always more to the story. She wasn't just a background character. Her life shaped the direction of humanity, even in ways that might make us uncomfortable. All right, we've already uncovered the story of Lulua, the first forgotten daughter, Adam and Eve, as told in the book of Adam and Eve. But here's where things get even more intriguing. In the book of Jubilees, she's given a new name. And yep, same person, different name, and a slightly different lens on her story. So let's dive into what the book of Jubilees has to say about and Cain's wife, and one of Adam and Eve's lesser-known daughters. The transition from the name Lulua to AW might seem small, but it's significant. While Lulua in the book of Adam and Eve is described as beautiful, more radiant even than her mother Eve, the name Awan carries a different tone in Hebrew. Onion can mean vice or iniquity. Scholars have suggested that this name reflects the shadow of Cain's actions, the murder of his brother, and the curse he carried. Yet, despite these associations, Awan's story isn't one of condemnation. Instead, it's one of resilience and continuity. When Cain was banished after killing Abel, he wasn't left to wander completely. Alone, and as his wife went with him together, they began to build a life far from Adam and Eve. According to the book of Jubilees, and bore children with Cain, and their descendants would eventually spread across the earth. Here's something fascinating. Cain is credited with building a city and naming it Enoch after his son. Awan's role in this legacy, though not explicitly detailed, is undeniable. She was the mother of Cain's lineage, and through her the family line continued. Without Awan, Cain's story might have ended in isolation and despair. Instead, she became part of the larger narrative of humanity's growth and expansion. The shift from Lula in the book of Adam and Eve to Anne in the book of Jubilees is a reminder of how different traditions and texts interpret the same figure. While Lua was remembered for her beauty, and is remembered for her role as Cain's wife and the mother of his descendants. Together, these stories give us a fuller picture of her life and legacy. All right, let's turn our attention to aka the second daughter of Adam and Eve. As mentioned in the book of Adam and Eve, while her story is often overshadowed by her siblings, it provides another fascinating glimpse into the early days of humanity. Let's dive in and uncover what we know about a CLE. The name, a CLE, isn't given much symbolic explanation in the text, but her role in the family. Dynamic is unmistakable, while Lulua was noted for her extraordinary beauty. AA was often described in contrast, seen as less favored in appearance. A's birth came after Eve conceived again, following the weaning of her first children, Cain and Lulua. Unlike Lula, who was described as being exceptionally beautiful, Aclea is presented without such descriptive praise. Her story doesn't focus on her physical appearance, but instead highlights her role within the familial dynamics and the unfolding events in Adam and Eve's lineage. When Abel was born, his name reflected his nature as a beloved and righteous child. Alongside him came Mao, his twin sister. This pairing immediately linked their destinies, as was the custom at the time for siblings to be paired in marriage to continue humanity's growth. Adam and Eve decided that aka would eventually marry Cain, while Abel would marry Lulua. This decision, however, would become a source of tension and tragedy within the family. The book of Adam and Eve subtly weaves a cly into the backdrop of the infamous conflict between Cain and Abel. While the focus of the narrative remains on the brothers, AA plays a crucial role. As the sister Cain was unwillingly paired with according to the text, Adam and Eve saw Abel as the favored son, and their preference extended to their desire to join him with Lua, the more beautiful sister. Meanwhile, Cain was to marry Aclea, who, in contrast to Lua, is described as ill-favored in Cain's eyes. This arrangement deeply angered Cain, fueling his jealousy and hatred, not only toward his brother, but also toward the circumstances he believed were unfairly thrust upon him. The text implies that Cain's resentment was exacerbated by this pairing, which he saw as a reflection of his parents' favoritism for Abel. The Book of Jubilees doesn't just rename her. It reframes her story. The change in name doesn't mean Azura is a different person. It's simply another lens through which her life is viewed, while AC's story in the book of Adam and Eve is rooted in personal struggles. The Book of Jubilees highlights her significance within the larger narrative of humanity's growth and survival. In the Book of Jubilees, Zurah is specifically identified as the wife of Seth, Adam and Eve's third son. This union was vital to the continuation of humanity's righteous line, especially after the devastating loss of Abel and the exile of Cain. Azura's marriage to Seth is described as a sacred bond that helped reestablish stability and hope for humanity's future. Here's what the Book of Jubilees tells us about her. Azur is born after Cain and Abel. Just like a CLE in the Book of Adam and Eve, after the tragic events involving Cain and Abel, Seth steps into the role of the righteous son. Azura becomes his wife, solidifying the next step in humanity's divine plan. Their union is blessed, and they give birth to a son named Enosh, who carries forward the tradition of worshiping God. This marks a pivotal moment in the narrative, as Enos is seen as the patriarch of a line devoted to righteousness. Azura's marriage. Toth symbolizes renewal after the chaos brought on by Cain's actions. Together, they become the foundation of a lineage that leads to No and ultimately to the Ma. In this sense, Azura's role isn't just about her personal journey. It's about her contribution to God's overarching plan for humanity. While AAA and Azura may seem like two different people at first glance, their stories align perfectly when you place them side by side. The name Azura, which appears in the Book of Jubilees, highlights her role as Seth's partner in rebuilding humanity's spiritual path. Meanwhile, the Book of Adam and Eve paints a more intimate picture of her struggles and resilience together. These texts give us a fuller understanding of showing us that Aclea, or Aora, is more than just a forgotten daughter of Adam and Eve. She's a symbol of hope, restoration, and divine purpose. In a time when humanity was just beginning to find its footing. Here's where things get interesting after Abel's death. Adam and Eve had another son. Seth, he was seen as a divine gift of replacement for Abel. And it was through Seth's lineage that humanity's righteous line would continue. The book of Adam and Eve doesn't explicitly say this, but ancient tradition suggests that Aclea may have later married Seth, continuing the family's lineage and fulfilling her role in God's plan. Think about it. Seth was born into a family that had already experienced deep loss, and Aclea would have shared in that loss together. They might have brought a sense of hope and renewal to Adam and Eve, becoming the foundation for a new chapter in humanity's story. If Aclea did indeed marry Seth, her life became part of the genealogy that eventually led to Noah, Abraham, and even Jesus Christ. So here's the million-dollar question. Why doesn't the Bible talk about Adam and Eve's daughters like Lulua or Alazur? If they played such significant roles in the survival and growth of humanity, why are their names and stories missing from the biblical text? For example, Genesis 5:4 says, after Seth was born, Adam lived 800 years and had other sons and daughters. That's it. No names, no details, just to mention that Adam and Eve had other children. The focus shifts to Seth because he's the one who carries the lineage leading to Noah and eventually to Jesus' the daughters, while crucial to humanity's survival weren't. Considered central to this narrative, so they were left unnamed in ancient texts. Women were often omitted from genealogies and historical accounts unless their roles were extraordinary or directly tied to the storyline. Think about women like Sarah, Ruth, or Mary. They're mentioned because their actions were pivotal to God's plan. But Adam and Eve's daughters, while essential to populating the earth, didn't have stories in the Bible that were seen as central to the overarching narrative. The book of Adam and Eve and the book of Jubilees, on the other hand, come from traditions that aim to fill in these gaps. They provide NAM relationships and even some personal struggles that were left out of the canonical texts. Let's not forget that the book of Jubilees and the book of Adam and Eve were written for different purposes than the canonical Bible. These texts often aim to expand on the stories found in Genesis, providing cultural and narrative details that were left out of the Bible. While they aren't considered canonical by most traditions, they offer insights into how ancient communities understood these stories and sought to preserve them. So, when we explore texts like the book of Adam and Eve, or the book of Jubilees, we're not just uncovering forgotten stories, we're gaining a deeper appreciation for the intricate and interconnected nature of God's plan. Whether they're called Aclea, Zuru, Ula, or something else, these daughters remind us of the vital, often unseen roles that shape history. If this story sparked your curiosity, there's so much more to uncover. Don't stop here. Let's keep diving into the untold stories.